All right, Diptyque Lauren is here to take us through the main headlines here in France. Hi, Diptyque. You're looking at Libération first, which is dedicating today's edition to the plight of animals.
That's right. It's not super positive. It's Libé's edition of Animals from the left-leaning paper this Friday. They're looking at all sorts of issues affecting animals and the relationship between humans and animals, from fur factories to the shocking loss of insect populations to the doping scandals around animals performing in high-level sports like horse races and dog races. Let's start with something a bit more positive. Maybe, I don't know if we can call it positive, visually palatable maybe. These photos from a London photographer, Tim Flack, who specializes in animal portraits. This is his most recent collection. He's been focusing on species that are threatened by extinction, like polar bears, gorillas, the Bengal tiger, lemurs, and rhinos. His style, Libé explains, is confrontational. Often he tries to look his animal subjects in the eyes.
And as you mentioned, Libé also publishing a series of articles on the more scandalous relationships between humans and animals.
And one of those most scandalous relationships does come from the production of fur, or fur factories as they're called, that essentially churn out animal fur for the fashion industry. It's at a terrible and torturous cost for foxes, rabbits, and other animals essentially killed for their fur. When it comes to fur, it's like meat. That's what Libé says. We prefer not to know where it comes from. Did you know, for instance, that Astrakhan fur that you often see on the Russian shapka hats actually is taken from a newborn lamb ripped from its mother's uterus? So this is one of the things that Libé explains. They also explain that while that the fashion industry is slowly starting to shun fur, with Gucci, Armani, Ralph Lauren, and Tommy Hilfiger all announcing that they'll no longer use fox fur, but other fashion houses like LVMH are showing no such signs of ethical consciousness. They're continuing to use crocodile and python leather, as well as fur, irrespective of the cost to the animals.
And a debate certainly important here in Paris, a fashion capital of the world. Moving on now to French politics. And after initially telling his ministers to be discreet, President Emmanuel Macron now wants them to be at the forefront of his politics.
Well, the reason for that is because we don't really know who are the ministers of Emmanuel Macron's government. According to Le Figaro, the right-leaning paper, a survey shows that nearly 6 months after their nominations, the majority of Macron's ministers are still pretty unknown to the general public. In fact, Le Figaro calls them a, quote, army of unknowns. Around 1 in 2 French people don't know 12 of the 19 ministers. The ones that they do know are Laura Flessel, who is a sports minister and fencing champion, and Nicolas Hulot, who's the ecology minister and also was very well known as a high-profile environmentalist prior to his nomination. Now, after months of evading TV sets and newspaper interviews, now the ministers are courting the media to defend Macron's policies and really explain who they are, show their face to the public, as per the president's request.
And L'Opinion, another French daily, wondering what happened to the female MPs in his government. Of course, they were celebrated when they were appointed, and now, what happened?
We're not quite sure where they are or what they're doing. We're a far cry from the March 8th meeting this year, when Emmanuel Macron, who was then a candidate, announced that he was the feminist candidate and said he'd be delighted to elect a female prime minister. Today, not only is the prime minister not a woman, but there are very few women in high positions within his entourage, within his government. According to L'Opinion, which is a right-leaning paper, in his close entourage, there are only 3 women in high positions of power, and the paper is wondering, is this because he doesn't trust women to be in high positions of power?
And moving on, the communist paper L'Humanité is looking at what you could call the outsourcing of sorts of French intelligence.
Well, 1 year ago, the French Interior Minister employed the services of an American startup company called Palantir to sift through and format data collected by French intelligence services. The idea was to help reinforce efforts in combating terrorism, domestic terrorism. Since then, American engineers have joined the startup at the Paris headquarters to train new analysts on their software. But for L'Humanité, which is a communist paper, the French intelligence data is now in the hands of Trump and the CIA. Maybe not so much, but the paper does explain that the startup is very close to the CIA, and therefore the paper is worrying about what it sees as the Americanization of French intelligence.
All right. Well, let's end with something that the French people can rally behind for sure. No controversy here. A French sporting champion who's eyeing his 10th world title in judo.
That's right. That man is Teddy Riner. He's a double Olympic champion in judo. He's taking part in Marrakech this weekend in World Championships, and he's eyeing his 10th title. L'Equipe has chosen 7 of his greatest sporting moments, including his most tactical victory, his most painful victory, his quickest victory, by the way, which came in 13 seconds in 2013. They've also published, as you see there, a collage of all the victories from his 138 combats, because since 2010, he has been undefeated.
Oh, what a stud. Divtika Laurent, you're a stud as well. You'll be back a little bit later with a look at the international papers. That's all for now. More news coming up in just a moment.